Hi, Adventure Alan here, and I'm going to talk to you about the REI Co-op Flash Air 2 tent. And first, the Flash Air 2 tent is a sub 2-pound, 2-person tent that costs under $300. And that's a big deal where tents with these specs are usually in the range of $600 to even $800. Or put another way, it's only £1 per person for full bug and rain protection, and it won't cost you an arm and a leg. Second, it's a type of ultralight backpacking tent that you might not be familiar with. It's a hybrid double wall, single wall, trekking pole supported tent. And yeah, that's a mouthful that we'll cover in more detail later. What you need to know is that this design saves you a bunch of weight and money versus a traditional domed backpacking tent that you might be familiar with, like, for instance, a big Agnes copper Spur. And just to be very clear, these types of tents do work. I've been using tents with this design, like the Flash Air 2, for over 17 years, back when I was the gear review editor at Backpacking Light. They performed well, even above tree line in the high Sierra, and I've even used them guiding in Alaska. And finally, while most reviews have focused on the Flash Air 1, which is the 1-person tent, the 2-person version of this tent is way, way better. And we'll tell you why later in this review. Anyway, to save time and cut to the chase, I'm only going to cover key things that you need to know. Why it's an important tent, exactly what type of tent it is, how it works, what's good about it, and how it could be better. Finally, at the end of this video, I'll give you some tips on how to best pitch and use the tent. My goal is to keep this video under 10 minutes. We'll see how I do. Okay, so you're viewing this because we went way over that 10-minute budget. I mean, way, way over. So we've decided to break this video into 2 parts, and part 2 will be a deep dive into the tent. And it's essential viewing for anybody that is seriously interested in buying the REI Flash Air 2 tent, or if you already own the tent and want to learn how to best use it. But we will cover in part 2 why the 2-person tent, the Flash Air 2, is way better than the 1-person tent, the Flash Air 1. And even if you are a 1-person, you should seriously consider buying the 2-person tent. We'll also cover tips and tricks on how to best pitch and use this tent. We've been using it for a while. We have, I think, some good stuff that'll help you get the most out of the tent. And finally, and maybe most important, we're going to cover condensation management 101. And the key to getting the most out of this tent and being the happiest camper is managing that condensation. And the Flash Air 2 has a whole bunch of features and configurations and things you can do to manage condensation in the tent to keep you warm, happy, and dry. So again, this video, which is part 1, is a general overview of the tent, its features, and how it works, and most importantly, why this is a significant tent. This tent is affordable, user-friendly, off-the-shelf, and ultralight. And those words don't usually go in the same sentence. So without further ado, let's jump into the overview. So this is the REI Flash Air 2 tent. It's set up in full rainfly mode as if it was going to rain, and it's actually a little cloudy, so that's a possibility. I'm going to cover what's important about this tent, the big picture of why it's something that you might be very interested in. First of all, as I said earlier, it's a sub 2-pound, 2-person tent for under $300. So to put that in perspective, compared to a traditional tent that you might be familiar with, like the big Agnes copper Spur 2, this tent costs $150 less, and it's a pound lighter. So that's about 30% less cost and 30% less weight for a 2-person tent. And it's one of the first tents by a major manufacturer and sold by a major retailer to use this tent design, which saves you both weight and money. Prior to this, this type of tent was the purview of cottage manufacturers like Tarptent or 6 Moon Designs. People a lot of times just feel more comfortable buying from a major retailer. So now this opens up this style of very sophisticated ultralight tent to a much broader audience. And finally, REI has sort of tweaked this design with their own modern update to it. They've added a couple things. They have these pole hubs, which make the walls more vertical and give you more ceiling space. We'll look at that in more detail later in the video. And these doors, which I'm just about getting ready to peel back, have all these multiple positions, which really expand the usefulness of the tent. So I'm going to go back now and take this sort of out of full on rain mode and peel back these front doors, and we'll start looking at some of the details of this tent. As I'm working through here, one of the things you can see is, and I'm peeling this back, these doors go all the way back to give you almost a little bit of stargazing or ceiling, sort of open ceiling effect. And it's great for ventilation. It's great for hot nights. And there are other modes, but this is the mode I'm going to just peel it back in for right now. But there are multiple positions on these doors, and I will cover them all in more detail. Okay, let's talk about tent livability, and I think REI has done a nice job with this Co-op Flash Air 2 tent to do some things to maximize the livability of this tent. First of all, we talked about these pole hubs and these vertical walls. So I have these nice vertical walls inside the tent here, which definitely gives me more room to move around than a sloping one. And these pole hubs also, they sort of angle up. So I've got like a nice 42-inch peak height. So I can easily sit up in this tent, not even in the middle of the tent. This sort of wall above your head, the ceiling wall, that's pretty vertical. It gives you sort of a nice area here. It slopes a bit more towards the foot. There is a small pole at the foot of the tent that's raising it enough that you can keep your sleeping bags away from the tent walls. It has a couple little small storage pockets in here, one on either side. I've got a headlamp in here and sunglasses in the other one. It is a little short on storage on the interior, but I've done a little rigged hack here to fix it. You see that it's got this sort of nice stargazing option here. So if you lay back on the edge of the tent and have these fully peeled back, I can actually look up and see the stars, which is nice. I showed you the multiple door configurations, but this is my favorite one. I measured the interior, and it's within an inch of spec. So it's big enough. There are a couple hang loops here. I've got a little interior light hung on the back loop on the door here. And then I have rigged a storage pocket up on the ceiling of this tent, which we'll get a better detail shot of in a second. But there are a couple loops up here, and I've hung a storage pocket on the ceiling of the tent. But in all, for a sub 2-pound tent, this is a pretty amazingly livable area. And this is a place where you could be in the tent for a little while and not completely lose it. It's actually pretty comfortable and nice. Okay, so let me walk you through the tent. First, as I said earlier, Allison and I have been using this sort of style tent for over 17 years. And this is a mature, time-tested tent design that works. But what's different about it versus a traditional backpacking tent like the big Agnes copper Spur? There's a couple big things. And the first thing I'm going to talk about, because it's the easiest, is its trekking pole supported design. While this tent, this REI Flash Air tent, does come with a pole that would go right in this position right here, you can save the weight and bulk of this pole by simply using the trekking pole that you have already with you, which is what I've done. So that covers sort of the trekking pole supported design. And you'll notice that, whereas in a big Agnes copper spur, one of these tents, you've got this sort of arcing, crossing domes. This is not a freestanding tent. I pretty much have to stake out the four corners of the tent here and both these doors here to get this tent to stand up. Doesn't mean it's a worse tent, but it means that I do need to stake it out to stand it up. So it is a non-freestanding tent. The other thing that differentiates this from a traditional backpacking tent is that we call it a hybrid single double wall design. A double wall design is what a normal backpacking tent has, and this has a whole mesh inner tent that's entirely separated from the rainfly. Rainflies condense. It's just the fact of being a waterproof fabric in a humid environment. They beat up water on the inside of it just like water beads up on a icy cold drink on a summer day. And what this inner tent does is it keeps you from brushing up against that wet rainfly. Doesn't happen, oh, by the way, condensation doesn't happen all the time, but it does. This is a hybrid in that you see you do have a mesh wall here against this whole side, and you have a little bit of mesh on the ceiling. But as you look at the ceiling panel here, that's going from this down to the floor at the foot end and this down to the floor at the head end, there is no mesh. So the rainfly in the inner tent body is the same. So this portion of the tent is a single wall because there's no mesh wall. This, if you don't manage condensation in the tent, can potentially be a problem, but it can be managed. And actually the two-person tent, this does a much better job of managing it. But that sort of covers why this tent is both lighter and less expensive. It's lighter because you have less material. You don't have the big pole set. You don't have a full inner or outer tent, so that saves you material. That saves you about 30% in cost and about 30% bulk and weight, which is also important, especially for things like kayaking or bike packing, or if you've got a small backpack, it's also more compact. And I'm just going to sort of wrap this video up with sort of a conclusion and pros and cons on the tent, and we'll move on to that. Okay, it's time to close this up. As I said earlier, I was shooting for 10 minutes. My best guess is this is a 20+ minute video, but it is what it is. So we're going to do pros and cons and then a quick conclusion here. So what do we like about the tent? Well, it's off the shelf from a major retailer, so that makes it available to a larger number of people. It's low weight. It's under 2 pounds. It's low cost for a tent that's weight. $300 is somewhere between $150 to $400 less than a tent of that weight. It's got a good area to weight ratio. It's got almost 24 square feet of living space for each pound, which puts it at the very high end of that range. It's got some nice living area. REI made a couple of really nice things to make this more livable. These hub poles here and these vertical walls and the multiple pitching on the doors, including this nice star casing goad, which is in right now. REI made a couple of really nice design improvements. I did this tent design, these hub poles that make these nice vertical walls and a higher peak height, and then this nice door design that has many options, but this stargazing mode that we really like. The two-person version of this tent does a great job of mitigating the condensation issues that might be a problem with this single wall, double wall tent design. And in all, it's a very compatible value for a well-designed ultralight backpacking tent that we think will appeal to a lot of people for a lot of uses and a lot of budgets. So some things, I don't want to say cons, but there's some things to be aware of with this tent. They kind of come with the territory with this tent design. Adjusting all the tie-outs and getting a taut pitch can be a bit fiddly. As we said earlier, definitely practice at home so that you're good at this. That rear pole is a little tight. We actually suggest you just leave it taut. Maybe it'll stretch out over time. I'm sure that REI will address that in a future, probably just the next batch of these tents. There's only 2 very small pockets in this tent, so there's not a lot of interior storage. But we did give you a hack to rig some storage on the roof of this tent. Again, always be aware of potential condensation. With judicious use of these doors and all the hacks I showed you on different ways to tie out and position these doors, you should be well informed on how to deal with that. But it is something that if you had a traditional backpacking tent, you would have to deal a little less with. And of course, this is not a freestanding tent. You do need to stake it out. You do need at least 6 stakeout points to keep it stable and erect. And if it's windy, you might need to stake out a few more areas. Again, that goes with the territory of saving some weight on a tent like this. So, what do we think about this? We're actually pretty positive on it. The REI Co-op Flash Air, it's a significant tent. It's one of the first Tarptent styled tents to be produced and distributed by a major retailer. And now anybody can have a sub 2-person, 2-pound tent for under $300. And the performance is there. I think REI has done a lot of nice things to make this a livable tent and to make this sort of single double wall tent design work well. The hub poles contribute to that by creating these vertical sidewalls, a nice peak height, some livable areas. The multiple positions on the doors is really nice. And in all, the REI Co-op Flash Air 2 it's a livable, economical tent that could fit the needs of many backpackers, kayakers, bike packers. It's really a very light tent that works in a variety of situations. So that's all we got here. Hopefully you found this review of this tent useful. As you can see, we've been aggressively putting out a lot of great videos. We're going to keep going at this pace all year. So please go ahead and like this video. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Go ahead and hit that bell so you get notified of all our great new videos. But thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you pretty soon with another great video. Until then, this is Adventure Alan signing out. And again, this is only part 1. Don't forget to watch part 2, which we consider essential viewing for anybody that's seriously interested in buying the REI Flash Air 2 tent, or anybody that already owns the tent and wants to learn how to better use it. We'll cover why the 2-person version of this tent is way better than the 1-person version. We'll give you a bunch of tips and tricks on how to better pitch and use this tent. And finally, and most important, we'll cover Condensation Management 101, how to best manage condensation in this tent. And the REI Flash Air 2 tent has a bunch of features in it that will seriously help you manage condensation or even eliminate it. Okay, so I forgot to mention we have a full written review of the REI Co-op Flash Air 2 tent. And if you look in the comment sections below this video, you'll find a link to that review and a bunch of other information. Adventure Alan has pretty much anything you want to know about backpacking and hiking on it, lots of detailed articles. So in addition to looking at the written review of this tent, go ahead and check out a bunch of our other great content. Thank you so much.